What's up, booktube? It's Leah Cooper, and today I'm bringing you the mid-year book freakout tag for 2020. I also want to touch base on all of my personal reading challenges and how they're going. So, I'm not sure off the top of my head who created this tag. I have never done it before. Like, I know it's the tag that everyone does at this time. People have been posting them all last week and over the weekend. But I always seem to miss this tag. I think it's because I usually tend to be kind of slumpy in the summer months. I don't know what it is, but I think if I looked at like my reading statistics for the last couple of years, that would hold true. So I just never think to do this tag, or I'm kind of maybe like taking a bit of a break from booktube, like when I'm supposed to be doing this tag. Like, I always think to do it when it's way too late. Like, I always think to do this tag in September or something, when it is definitely way past the middle of the month. But I got my questions from Books with Emily Fox. So I'll leave a link to her version of this video down below. And if I can find the originator of this tag, I will leave a link to their channel down below as well. So let's start with question 1. Best book you've read so far in 2020? The one downside to the way I organized my bookshelves is that because they're cubes, they are like triple stacked. They're like 3 rows, and the furthest row in the back is books I have read. So I put everything I've read to the very, very back, and I push everything I haven't read to the front, and that makes getting to any of the books a little bit tough. Okay, so I think for this question, best book I've read in 2020, it's going to be, I have 2 answers for that. The first one is an anthology, and that is Mission Critical. This was put together by Jonathan Strahan. It was published by Rebellion Publishing. It's a sci-fi short story collection, multi-author, and I just picked this up because in the past I've loved Jonathan Strahan's other edited collections, and this did not disappoint. This has, I want to say, 15 stories in it. Yes, 15 stories, all of them around the theme of what do you do when shit hits the fan, and they're space stories. And not a single one of these stories was a miss for me. Like, I really love this collection start to finish. I think if you want to get into slightly harder sci-fi short stories and you're looking for a place to start, this is an excellent place to start. In general, I think you could pick up any of Jonathan Strahan's multi-author anthologies and be in good hands. The other kind of best of 2020 is definitely going to be The Cursive Chalian by Lois McMaster-Bujold. In the first third of 2020, I was reading a lot of Lois McMaster-Bujold. I've kind of slowed down just because I got up to as far in the Penrick series as I could get with my library, and so I've also just had a lot of reading for BookTube SFF awards to do, but I was just like loving the realm of the Five Gods, world of the Five Gods, whatever that universe is from Bujold. I've been loving that. It's our fantasy series, and I read like all the Penrick and Desdemona, and I also read The Cursive Chalian, which is set in that universe but takes place way hundreds of years after Penrick and Desdemona, and I adored this book. Again, another easy 5 stars. I love the character. Now I'm not going to be able to remember his name because I did read this like 4 months ago, but back during like Tome Topple around 10, but Kaz, his name was Kaz. He was such a tragic, like, heroic figure, and I am totally a little bit of a basic bitch. I'm not necessarily into like morally gray characters. Not to say that I'm not into them, but I also just like I really love morally good, upright characters who suffer and try to do good and try to help people, and that was Kazriel. He was assigned to be the kind of teacher and scribe for a princess, and in the course of him trying to just teach her and look after her, he gets embroiled in all this like political court intrigue. He ends up kind of like trying to sacrifice himself to the gods to save her from basically a forced marriage with a rapist, and in doing so he also gets himself entangled in the business of the gods, and it is such a fantastic book from start to finish. I loved it. So those would be my 2 best books of 2020 so far. Okay, and then question number 2 is best sequel you've read in 2020, which is perfect because like the third book that was kind of like edging up there into best books I've read in 2020 but couldn't quite be on the same pedestal as those 2 is a sequel. So that would be Holy Sister by Mark Lawrence. This is the 3rd book in the Book the Ancestors series. So I've been putting off reading this because I fully expected it to be on the BookTube SFF Awards shortlist for the adult fantasy category, because the first 2 books in the series were, and then it wasn't, and I was like, crap. But then I went ahead and read it for a readathon, and I was really happy that I did, because I think that it was like such a good wrap up of the trilogy. It didn't answer everything I wanted answered, and it didn't, I think it went a little easy on the ending, not the conflicts that happened, but just kind of the resolution. I think it went a little light on that. But I really loved all of the plot, and I loved the dual timeline that it had again. I love how it connected back to the first book. I loved all the relationships in it. I was devastated. I sobbed my eyes out at the end. Really loved it. I'm definitely going to read the next trilogy. I assume it's going to be a trilogy. The next entry into this universe by Mark Lawrence. So far, I have not had success or been inspired to continue with any of his other books. I'm just going to put this out here because I feel like no one talks about this. I got an arc of One Word Kill, and I DNF'd it last year because it's incredibly fat phobic, and I think that it's also a little I don't know what the term for ableist. Well, maybe not. I don't think ableist is the right term, but it was derogatory towards neurodivergence in a way that was uncritical, unexamined. It was just like the characterization of the protagonist because it's the 80s. And I don't see anyone talking about that, and I thought it was really disgusting, and I had to DNF that book. So I haven't had success with any of the other books, but I do like this one series in this one universe. So, number 3. New releases you haven't read yet, but want to. I don't really stay up with new releases, so I don't know. Let me check and see if Summer by Ali Smith has come out. I feel like it hasn't. Yeah, no, so Summer by Ali Smith is kind of my only anticipated release for 2020, and that doesn't come out till July 2nd, so it hasn't even come out yet. I don't think there's anything big that's on my radar that's come out that I haven't gotten to, just because I don't keep up with new releases. Question 4. Most anticipated release for the second half of the year. And so this is going to be the same thing. Like, I just don't... Oh, okay, actually, in response to question 3, I guess my most anticipated release that I haven't gotten around to reading is The City We Became. Is that what it's called? In the City We Became, the N.K. Jemisin book. I started to read her short story collection, How Long Till Black Future Month. That has a short story in it that's the precursor to the novel. Let me double check the title. Oh, it's just The City We Became. Okay, because the short story is In a City Born Great. So I haven't read The City We Became yet. It wasn't necessarily something I was like anticipating or anything, but I do think it's probably the newest new release that I do want to get to that I haven't gotten to yet. So now for books that haven't come out yet, that are coming out in the second half of the year, I guess you could say the Ali Smith, Summer by Ali Smith is the 4th book in her Seasons Quartet. That's coming out on July 2nd, technically next quarter. I'm not into new releases, so I mean I read them, but I don't anticipate them. I don't make TBRs or like lists of books I anticipate reading, before they come out. This is not a thing I do. Question 5. Biggest disappointment. Oh man. There's been a couple of disappointments. The Emperor's Edge by Lindsay Buroker was quite a disappointment. That book was not good. And I liked her Balanced on the Blade's Edge novel, and I've owned The Emperor's Edge for a really long time, and so I was definitely hoping it would be better than it was. The Historian was another massive, massive disappointment. I'm not sure I went into it expecting to love it or anything. It was just the book that had been on my TBR the longest, and it was a big chunky book. And it took forever. It took me like 80 days to read. And the first half of it is just so badly paced, like such a slog to read, and it's so pretentious. Like, all the bits that are really, really slow are also incredibly pretentious. But really, the disappointment wasn't that, because you kind of expect that with that kind of a book. The disappointment was the final showdown with Dracula. It was over in a sentence, and it was so just such a letdown for I read almost 700 pages for that. Like, no. So that was a pretty big disappointment. I think in terms of like pure enjoyment disappointment, that would probably be Spin the Dawn by Elizabeth Lim, and I hate to say that because I absolutely loved the first half of that book. You might even say the first 2/3 of that book, but the last third was such a 180, haired off in a completely other direction, and also just it felt like it was written kind of in a rush, kind of not with the same attention devoted to it as the first half of the novel. And I've since read the sequel. I got it as an ARC. I'm going to be doing a review of it closer to the publication date. I really feel like the author spent a lot of time developing the first half of Spin the Dawn and rushed through the rest of it, and that is only more confirmed by the sequel, which feels incredibly rushed and very underdeveloped. So yeah, those were kind of my big standout disappointments this year. Question 6, biggest surprise. Okay, biggest surprise was probably, and this was completely unfair of me to assume that it would be bad, but my biggest surprise was that The Cruel Prince was decently well written. I fully expected Holly Black. This is the first Holly Black I'd ever read. Based on her prior collaborations, like who she's chosen to collaborate with, Cassandra Clare, I fully expected her writing to not be very good. And it's good. Like, it's fine. Wow, my camera just fell forward on me. Anyways, so yeah, it's good. It's fine. It's very readable. It's quite enjoyable. I'm not always these aren't the best things I've ever read. I'm not the biggest fan of the series. It's not like an obsession, but it's pretty good. I wouldn't be averse to reading another Holly Black series. Maybe? I don't know. I'm not super into fairies anymore. Cause I'm not 12 and I'm not in the Labyrinth fandom anymore. But I'm not adverse to it. Question 7. Favorite new author, debut, or new to you? So I'm looking at everything I've read, and I've read a lot of stuff this year by authors I've previously read, or it's books in kind of ongoing series or something. Okay, but for totally new to me author, it'd probably have to be maybe Rachel Hartman. She wrote Tess of the Road. It's hard to say that this is a new favorite author because I've only read one of her books. And I usually don't say that unless I've read multiple things by the author. So I read Tess of the Road earlier this year. Really loved it. I think I gave it a 4.5 stars, but I don't know. And I thought it was a very good YA fantasy with a really interesting universe, well written. It really delved into some serious topics, which I think a lot of YA fantasy doesn't do. They tend to be a little cotton candy. This definitely wasn't. It gave it a kind of a more complex kind of depth. So I really loved that, and I really did love how it was written. Another author who was completely new to me that I read this year was Yangzi Chu. She wrote The Ghost Bride. I listened to that right at the start of the year, and that's been kind of one of my recurring recommending it to people because I don't think it's necessarily a thing that most of the people who watch me would necessarily stumble across, but it was surprisingly deep into the fantasy genre. But I don't, again, it's the only thing I've read from her though, so I don't know if like I would love all of her other books, or if it maybe that one was just like the right combination of topics, plot, and tropes maybe. I do want to read her latest novel though. I can't remember what it's called, but it is on my radar to get to eventually. Especially if I can get it on an audiobook and the author narrates it again. She is an author who narrated her own book, and it is lovely. She did a really good job. Okay, question 8. Newest fictional crush. I don't have one. I don't really do fictional crushes. Question 9. Newest favorite character. Easy. Kazriel from the Cursive Chalian. Far and away favorite new character. Absolutely adore him. Question 10. Book that made you cry. The Cursive Chalian made me cry. Holy Sister made me cry. Not as big of a book crier as I used to be, or maybe I'm just not reading the stuff that really makes me cry. I think that Sorcery of Thorns, it didn't make me cry, but it might have made me get a little misty-eyed, like right at the end, because I will say that even though that book was kind of like, it was just average for me, I do think the ending was done really, really well. Totally see it. You can totally see it coming, but that's not a bad thing. It's like really set up, and it's a good ending. And maybe a little misty-eyed in that one. Okay. Question 11. Book that made you happy. So again, Cursive Chalian. It did make me sob my eyes out, but it also made me really happy because I really loved the ending and like how everything wrapped up and how the characters were rewarded or punished, etc. Rewarded. Another book that really made me happy. You know, I think a book that stands out as making me happy would probably be The Forgotten Beasts of Eld by Patricia McKillip. This was another one where like I think all of the themes were set up really well throughout this book, and so the ending is like a very satisfying ending, happy conclusion, like the characters, you know, succeed in a way that's very satisfying and feels like it was like, you know, planting and payoff was there, and I was just like happy for them at the end. Another one that I think made me happy would be The Prisoner of Limnos. Again, Lois McMaster visual. This is the last in the Penrick books that I've read up until this point. And this one had a really happy ending for Penrick. And it resolved kind of a 3-book arc or 3-novella arc that had been going on. And it was in a very like satisfying way where I was really happy for the characters and like what they had accomplished and like gotten to in their lives. I don't know where the series is going to go from here, but yeah, that was another one. Question 12. Most beautiful book you've bought so far this year or received. Have I bought any? I mean, I have purchased a bunch of books. Were any of them very pretty though? I bought a lot of mass market paperbacks this year, which aren't necessarily gorgeous books. Oh, okay, wait, actually. So, technically I didn't buy these. I received them as my severance package from work. I got to take home a box of books. So, that would be these 3 Patricia A. McKillip books that I picked up. So I've got Odd Magic and The Book of Atrix Wolf, and in the Fortress of Sayre, which in the Fortress of Sayre has like just a gorgeous back cover. I mean, they all have gorgeous back covers, really. Like, look at Odd Magic has all this on the back. Another book I think I got in that Severance book haul was Updraft by Fran Wilde. I think this is really pretty too. But yeah, I don't know. I don't necessarily buy things for their aesthetic. I just buy stuff that I really desperately want to read, and that's a good price. Okay. And then the last question, question 13. What books do you need to read by the end of the year? Well, let me put these back real fast. then I'll grab what remains of my 20 and 20 list. So, gotta get read before the end of this year. I've got this copy of Before Mars by Emma Newman. This was on like 3 or 4 TBRs at the beginning of this year, and it kept getting pushed back, and it kept getting pushed back, and it kept getting pushed back, mostly because of the BookTube SFF Awards. So I still have this because my library's been closed, and they haven't been allowing returns. So I now have this until at least August 1st, and I definitely need to get this read before I have to return it to the library, because if I have this out from the library for like 6 months, then I gotta freaking read it. And also I know I'm gonna love it. And then I have this shelf of 14 books remaining for my 20 and 20 TBR, but I'm just gonna talk about the 5 that are like standouts that I need to get read. So obviously I've got Cloud Atlas and In the Cities of Coin and Spice, which is on this month's TBR. So I gotta get those read this month. And then kind of like the stuff that's been lingering on that TBR that I had a while, or maybe I spent a lot of money on, and I just got to get them read. Practical Magic. I've been trying to read this for like this might be the 4th year I've been trying to read this. Got to get this read this year. And then I've also got the Jane Austen book club. I finally read Sense and Sensibility. It was the last of the Jane Austens that was holding me back from giving this a read. I know that this has a really bad rating on Goodreads, but like I really want to read this. I think it's gonna be fun. I'm a sucker for the movie. I know I'm trash, but I do, and so I'm really excited to read this. And then the last thing is Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. I purchased this as a pre-order, not with my own money. I did get a Christmas gift card, so I used that, but I purchased it as a pre-order, and I hate when I do that and then I don't get around to reading the book. I also think I'm gonna love this too, so yeah, those are kind of the standouts of books that I have to get read before the end of the year. Is there anything else? I'm trying to think. I don't think so. I do have some arcs, because like this month, my TBR this month is really like arc heavy. Like it's all these arcs that I really got to get read before the books come out, and I've already read 2 out of 5, so like I'm doing pretty good and feeling pretty confident about that. But yeah, so that is my mid-year book Freakout tag. Just checking in on kind of like my personal challenges this year. I've got the 20 to read in 2020. I'm not doing super well on that. Like I said, I have 14 things left to read. I'm going to be trying to read 2 per month. These are the 2 I need to read in June, and I haven't started either of them. So that I'm a little bit behind schedule on that, 100%, because I've only read 6 out of 20, and we're halfway through the year. And I've got a lot of like really big chunkers left to do. My other big challenge, but that being said, I should have more time to read books off that list now that the BookTube SFF Awards reading is done. So it's fine. I'm feeling okay about it. My other big self-challenge was to read more of my personally owned books and read less from the library. Right now, 57% of what I have read has come from the library. And then 38% of what I've read, is that right? Yeah, 38% of what I've read has come from my personal collection, either digital or physical. Like 33% is from my physical shelves, and about 5% is from my Kindle. And then like 4.8, so basically 5% of what I've read has come from NetGalley. So the library is still too high. I think I said I wanted to get it down to where like 60 to 70% of what I'd read had come from my personal collections. So obviously I am like far from that goal. But again, this number is very inflated because a lot of what I read in April, May, even March were library books because I was reading for the BookTube SFF Awards. And so the first half of the year is just going to be inflated for that reason. Now that that reading is over and I can focus again like on my 20 and 20 shelf, I'm going to be just reading a lot more from what I own. So I have confidence that that number will go down. Will I actually hit that 60 or 70 from personal shelf reading? I don't know. And also, I will say I made that really aggressive kind of goal when I was working at the bookstore and I was buying a lot of books. Like I was buying maybe 20 books a month. But I've been laid off and I'm not purchasing books anymore. So it's not as big of a deal. You know, I feel a lot more I feel a lot better about just donating some money to the library and reading more library books at this point, you know? But anyway, so that's kind of my check-in, how I'm doing. Oh, actually, I guess I have one more goal, which is to read like what, 72 books this year. I'm doing great on that. Yeah. My goal for the year was to read 72 books. That was kind of based on last year, how many books I averaged last year, and then like kind of pushing myself a little bit. So I have currently read 42 out of 72. So I am 10 books ahead of schedule, I think. Let me check my Goodreads. No, according to Goodreads, I'm 9 books ahead of schedule. And I should continue to push that ahead. I probably won't hit 100 books this year unless I like really kick it in the last quarter of the year, which might happen. That is like a pretty heavy reading period for me. But if I only hit like 80 books this year, that would still be really great. I have been trying to read about 80 pages per day on average every month. And so far I've been doing pretty good on that. I feel like I'm a little bit behind this month, but I think that just might be a gut feeling. I think I might actually be on track. Yeah, I think that's it. My average rating of everything that I've read so far this year is 3.5 stars, which is fine. It means it's good. Like, I think that's a pretty decent average rating. That has definitely gone up. It was hovering like 3.33 for quite a while. So that's, I think, a good sign. So yeah, let me know down in the comments how your reading is going. Are you ahead of schedule? Are you behind schedule? Are you discovering some really great things? Are you in a bit of a slump? Let me know. And yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next week for hopefully a recommendations video. We'll see how it goes. Yeah, thanks for watching.